She just wanted to start over in peace. She was hired as a nanny in a mansion marked by death and by a gaze that never left her in peace. What she discovered inside could destroy or awaken a love that should never have existed. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised by this tale. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The road wound through Pine Ridge like an old scar on the landscape, and Sarah Westmont gripped the steering wheel of the rental car more tightly as the first raindrops began to drum on the windshield. The GPS had lost signal miles ago, but she continued following the faded signs pointing toward the Blackwood estate. Each turn took her further from civilization, deeper into a world that seemed suspended in time. She had accepted the job out of desperation, not vocation. The position of housekeeper and nanny for two motherless children in an isolated house in the mountains paid too well to be true. But Sarah needed invisibility, a place where no one would ask questions about her past or about the scars she hid beneath her long sleeves. 3 months had passed since she fled Chicago, leaving behind a life that had nearly destroyed her and a man who still haunted her nightmares. The mansion appeared before her like an apparition among the pine trees. It was an imposing structure of stone and wood, with pointed towers and windows that looked like empty eyes observing her arrival. The style reminded her of colonial mansions, but there was something European in the architecture, something that didn't belong in these American mountains. Gardens that were once magnificent now grew wild around the property, and ivy covered much of the exterior walls, giving the house an air of elegant abandonment. Sarah parked near the main entrance and remained in the car for a few minutes, observing the dark windows. Only a faint light shone in what appeared to be the library on the ground floor. It was almost 8 in the evening, and the rain had intensified, creating a curtain of water that distorted the outline of the house. She took a deep breath, grabbed her only suitcase, and ran to the front door. Before she could knock, the door opened. A middle-aged woman with gray hair pulled back in a severe bun stared at her with an expression that mixed relief and concern. "Miss Westmont." Her voice was hoarse, as if it hadn't been used for warm conversations in a long time. "I'm Martha, the cook. I was worried about the road with this rain." "Good evening." Sarah entered, shaking the water from her coat. "Sorry for the delay. The GPS didn't work properly up here." Martha closed the heavy door behind her, and the sound echoed through the entrance hall like a prison gate closing. The interior of the house was even more impressive than the exterior. The vaulted ceiling rose to a dizzying height, and a dark wooden staircase spiraled up to the second floor. Old paintings decorated the walls, portraits of people Sarah didn't recognize but who seemed to observe her with disturbing intensity. "The children are already asleep," said Martha, walking ahead. "Mr. James is in the library. He wants to meet you, but said not to worry if you're tired from the trip." There was something in the way Martha spoke about James Blackwood that made Sarah frown, a hesitation, as if she carefully chose each word. "That's fine. I'd rather meet him tonight." Sarah followed Martha down the hall, noticing that her footsteps echoed strangely, as if the house were larger inside than it appeared from the outside. Martha stopped in front of a double door of carved wood. "Mr. James?" She knocked lightly. "Miss Westmont has arrived." A deep, measured voice answered from the other side. "Come in." Martha opened the doors and gestured for Sarah to enter, but she herself did not go in. "I'll prepare something warm for you to eat. The kitchen is at the end of the hall if you need anything during the night." Sarah nodded and entered the library. The first thing that hit her was the smell: old leather, waxed wood, and a hint of something she couldn't identify. Perhaps fireplace smoke, although the fire was out. The walls were covered with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, filled with books that seemed untouched for years. An antique desk occupied the center of the room, covered with papers and documents. Behind the desk, James Blackwood was watching her. Sarah had seen photos of him on the internet when researching the family before accepting the job. Renowned criminal defense attorney, specialized in homicide cases, with an impeccable reputation and an elite clientele. But the photos didn't do justice to the man before her. James was around 40, with dark hair sprinkled with silver at the temples and eyes of such an intense blue that they seemed to pierce her soul. There was a natural elegance in his movements, even sitting down, but also a rigidity that suggested a man constantly on guard. "Miss Westmont." He stood up, and Sarah noticed he was tall, probably over 6 feet. He wore a button-down shirt with rolled-up sleeves and dark pants, expensive clothes but without ostentation. "Welcome, Mr. Blackwood," she approached, extending her hand. "Thank you for the opportunity." When their hands touched, Sarah felt an electric shock run up her arm. James also seemed to feel something, as his eyes narrowed slightly and he released her hand more quickly than would be natural. "Please sit down." He gestured to a leather armchair in front of the desk. "Would you like a drink? Wine, perhaps?" It was a long journey. "Some water is fine." Sarah settled into the armchair, crossing her legs. James poured water from a crystal pitcher and handed it to her, again avoiding hand contact. "I imagine you have questions about the job," he said, sitting back down. His voice was deep, with a slight accent she couldn't identify. "About the children." "A few." Sarah took a sip of water, buying time to organize her thoughts. "In the information I received, it said they lost their mother 2 years ago. It must have been difficult for everyone." A shadow passed over James's face. He picked up a crystal glass on the desk. There was an amber liquid inside, probably whiskey, and took a sip before answering. "Elizabeth died in an accident here on the property." Each word came out measured, controlled. "Lily was 5 years old, Noah just 3. They are still recovering." "And how did they react to the other people who cared for them? Were there other nannies before me?" James hesitated. It was an almost imperceptible pause, but Sarah was accustomed to reading people. She had learned that the hard way. "There were some. None adapted well to the atmosphere of the house. It's isolated, can be oppressive for those not used to." So he drank again. "I hope you'll be different." "I intend to be." Sarah straightened her shoulders. "I came here because I need this job, Mr. Blackwood. I'm not the type who gives up easily." James studied her for a long moment, and Sarah had the impression he was seeing much more than she wanted to reveal. There was something predatory in that gaze, but also a hidden vulnerability that intrigued her. "Good. Martha can show you to your room. Your duties begin early tomorrow morning. The children have breakfast at 7. Lily has private lessons in the morning with a tutor who comes 3 times a week. Noah is more reserved. Both need patience." "I understand." Sarah stood up. "Anything else I should know?" James also stood, walking to one of the shelves. He picked up a book, flipped through some pages without really reading them. "The house. 'Tis old. It makes strange noises during the night. Doors that seem to open by themselves, footsteps upstairs when everyone is asleep. Don't be frightened. They're just echoes of the past." The way he said this sent a shiver down Sarah's spine. Echoes of the past. James closed the book with a dry snap and stared at her again. "Old houses hold memories, Miss Westmont. Some are more persistent than others." Before she could ask what exactly that meant, the library door opened and Martha appeared. "Your room is ready, miss," said the cook, "and I left a sandwich and tea on the tray." "Thank you." Sarah looked at James one last time. "Good night, Mr. Blackwood." "James," he said, surprising her. "You can call me James." "Then call me Sarah." He nodded, and for a moment something changed in the atmosphere between them, a subtle, almost imperceptible connection, but real. Martha led Sarah down the hall to a secondary staircase that led to the 2nd floor. The room that would be hers was at the end of a long corridor, far from the other rooms. "This was Miss Elizabeth's room when she was single," said Martha, opening the door. After they married, she moved to the master bedroom with Mr. James. The room was spacious and well decorated, with a double bed, an antique desk, and an armchair by the window overlooking the gardens. Everything was impeccably clean, but there was a strange smell in the air, too sweet, like wilting flowers. "Martha," Sarah said, placing her suitcase on the bed, "the other nannies, why did they really leave?" Martha was silent for so long that Sarah thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was even lower. "This house It doesn't let people leave easily, especially young women. Martha looked at the window where rain still beat against the glass. The last one, Miss Jessica. She said she heard voices during the night. Conversations in Mrs. Elizabeth's room. Music coming from the piano in the living room, even with the piano closed. And you, do you hear these things? Martha met Sarah's gaze. I've worked here for 15 years. I saw Miss Elizabeth arrive as a bride, saw her change. This house has its own rhythms, its own rules. It's better to learn to respect them. With that, Martha left, closing the door behind her. Sarah was alone in the room, listening to the sound of rain and the creaking of old wood. She ate the sandwich, without much appetite, and drank the tea, trying to organize her impressions of the first day. James Blackwood was exactly the type of man she should run from. Powerful, controlling, with secrets hidden behind those penetrating blue eyes. But there was something about him that intrigued her, a familiar pain she recognized in herself. And the children. She had barely seen them, but Martha had spoken of them with genuine concern. Sarah took a shower in the bathroom adjacent to the room, noticing that the water took longer than normal to heat up and that the pipes made a strange noise. When she finally lay down, it was already past midnight. Sleep, however, didn't come easily. With each noise from the house, and there were many, she startled. Footsteps in the hallway, the groan of wood expanding and contracting, the wind howling through, the trees outside. At one point she was certain she heard music coming from somewhere in the house. A melancholy melody played on the piano. At 3 in the morning she gave up on sleeping. She put on a robe and decided to explore the house a bit. If she was going to live here, she needed to become familiar with the environment. The corridor was immersed in shadows, illuminated only by the faint light coming from the windows. Sarah walked barefoot, trying not to make noise. She passed several closed doors, wondering which one was the children's room, which was the master bedroom, where James slept. When she reached the end of the corridor, she noticed one of the doors was ajar. Faint light escaped through the crack. Curious, she approached and peeked inside. It was a feminine room, decorated in shades of pink and gold. An antique vanity occupied one corner, with ornate mirrors and perfume bottles still lined up on the surface. The bed was made as if someone would sleep there soon. Elizabeth's room. Sarah gently pushed the door, which opened without a sound. She entered, driven by a morbid curiosity. This was the room of the dead woman, the mother of the children she would now care for. She walked to the vanity, observing the personal objects that remained untouched. There were photographs in silver, frames. Elizabeth with James on their wedding day. Elizabeth pregnant. Elizabeth with her young children. The woman was beautiful. Wavy blonde hair, green eyes, radiant smile. In the more recent photos, however, there was something different in her gaze. Her shadow, a concern that contrasted with her external beauty. She was beautiful, wasn't she? Sarah turned quickly, her heart racing. James was at the door, watching her. He had changed from his formal clothes to a simple t-shirt and pajama, pants, but still maintained that natural elegance. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "I couldn't sleep, and you don't need to explain." James entered the room, walking until he stood beside her in front of the vanity. "I come here sometimes too, when I can't sleep." They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the photographs. Sarah was intensely aware of his proximity, of the heat emanating from his body, of the smell of his skin, something masculine and clean, with a hint of expensive cologne. How did she die? The question came out before Sarah could contain herself. James picked up one of the photographs, the one from the wedding. Accident. She was walking in the gardens during a storm. A tree fell. It must have been terrible for you, for the children. It was. James put the photo back in its place. But sometimes I wonder if it wasn't a relief. Sarah stared at him, shocked by the confession. Elizabeth was ill in the last few months, he continued, his voice low and controlled. Not physically, mentally. She said she heard voices, that she saw things that didn't exist. The doctors called it late postpartum depression stress, but you think it was something else. James looked at her, and Sarah saw a raw vulnerability in those blue eyes. I think this house was driving her crazy, just as it drove other people crazy before her. And yet, you still live here? This house has been in the family for generations. I can't simply abandon it. He paused. And sometimes I think she's still here, Elizabeth, watching, waiting. Waiting for what? James moved closer, and Sarah felt his warm breath against her face. Waiting to be replaced. The silence that followed was charged with an almost palpable tension. Sarah knew she should leave, go back to her room, maintain professional distance. But there was something magnetic about James, something that attracted her even against her will. "Are you afraid of this house?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Should I be?" "Probably." James raised his hand, almost touching her face, but stopped a few inches from her skin. "But I hope you're not." Sarah felt her heart accelerate. There was danger in this man. She knew that instinctively. But there was also a pain she recognized, a loneliness that echoed her own. "I should go back to my room," she whispered. "You should," he agreed, but didn't move away. They stayed like this for a few more seconds, two strangers united by unspoken secrets and a dangerous attraction. Then Sarah took a step back. "Good night, James." "Good night, Sarah." She left Elizabeth's room and walked back down the hallway, feeling his gaze burning into her back. When she finally reached her room and closed the door, she was trembling. She lay down on the bed, but sleep remained distant. The image of James in his dead wife's room, the intimacy of that moment, the sexual tension between them, all of this mixed with Martha's warnings and the mysteries of the house. When she finally fell asleep, dawn was breaking, and her dreams were populated by a blonde woman with green eyes who whispered her name in the wind. The next day, Sarah woke to soft knocking on the door. It was Martha bringing breakfast on a tray. "The children are waiting for you in the living room," said the cook. "Mr. James has already left. He has a court hearing today." Sarah dressed quickly and went downstairs to meet Lily and Noah. She found them sitting on an antique sofa in the living room, both silent, watching her with large, curious eyes. Lily was now 7, with curly brown hair like her father's and green eyes like her mother's. She was a pretty girl, but there was a seriousness in her face that didn't match her age. Noah, 5, looked more like James, dark hair and blue eyes, but there was a fragility in him that broke Sarah's heart. "Hello," Sarah said, approaching slowly. "I'm Sarah. I've come to take care of you." Lily studied her for a long moment. "Are you going to leave like the others?" The direct question caught Sarah by surprise. "I don't plan to. Why do you want me to leave?" "No," Noah spoke for the first time, his voice small and hesitant. "But Mommy doesn't like when other women stay here." A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. "Mommy!" Lily nudged her brother. "We're not supposed to talk about that." "About what?" Sarah sat in the armchair facing them, trying to appear casual. "About Mommy," Noah whispered. "She still lives here, in her room. Sometimes she comes to visit us during the night." Sarah felt a chill in her stomach. Children had fertile imaginations, especially after a traumatic loss. It was normal for them to create fantasies to deal with the pain. "Noah," she said gently, "your mommy isn't here anymore. She went to heaven, remember?" "No," Lily interrupted, shaking her head vigorously. "She didn't. She's trapped here, because of what happened." "What happened?" The two children exchanged a complicit look, as if sharing a terrible secret. "We can't tell," Lily finally said. "Daddy would be angry." Sarah realized she wouldn't get anything more from them at that moment. She spent the rest of the morning trying to win their trust, playing with them, reading stories. Gradually, they began to relax, especially Noah, who seemed eager for female attention. Lily's private tutor arrived at noon, an elderly man named Professor Henry, who taught English and mathematics. While Lily studied, Sarah played with Noah in the garden. It was then that she noticed something strange. Noah constantly looked at a specific window on the second floor, the window of Elizabeth's room. "What are you looking at, Noah?" The boy pointed to the window. "Mommy's there." Sarah looked. The window was empty, only the curtain moving slightly. "There's no one there, sweetheart." "Yes, there is," Noah insisted. "She's waving at me." Sarah felt a chill. She picked Noah up and carried him inside the house, deciding she would talk to James about it when he returned. James returned late in the afternoon, looking tired and tense. Sarah waited for him in the library, where she had met him the night before. "How was the first day?" he asked, pouring himself some whiskey. "Interesting." Sarah chose her words carefully. "The children are adorable, but they talk about their mother as if she were still alive." James stiffened. "It's normal. Children need time to process loss." "James, Noah said he saw Elizabeth in the window of her room this afternoon." James drank the whiskey in one go. "He's a child with a lot of imagination." "And if it's not imagination?" James stared at her with that penetrating gaze. "Do you believe in ghosts, Sarah?" The question was loaded with meaning. Sarah thought of her own hauntings, the nightmares that had pursued her since she left Chicago. "I believe some people leave very deep marks in the places where they lived, especially if they died traumatically." James approached her, and Sarah felt again that electric tension between them. "Elizabeth died here on this property, and it wasn't a peaceful death." He paused, as if debating with himself about how much to reveal. "She was disturbed in the last months of her life, paranoid. She said, I was cheating on her, that I wanted to get rid of her." "And were you?" The question escaped before Sarah could censor herself. James stared at her with an indecipherable expression. "Was I what? Cheating on her or wanting to get rid of her?" Sarah swallowed hard. "Either one." James moved even closer, until she could feel the heat from his body. "You're direct, aren't you? I like that." His voice was hoarse. "The answer is no to the first question and maybe to the second." "Maybe. Elizabeth was sick, Sarah, in the last month. She wasn't the woman I married anymore. She was someone different, someone who frightened me." James raised his hand and this time touched Sarah's face. His fingers were warm against her skin. "But you," he murmured, "you don't frighten me. On the contrary." Sarah knew she should move away, but her body wouldn't obey. It had been months since she had felt a man's touch, months since she had fled from a situation that had almost destroyed her. And James was the type of man who had always attracted her, dangerous, complex, with layers of mystery she wanted to unravel. "James," she whispered, "we shouldn't." "Shouldn't what?" He leaned in, his lips almost touching hers. "Feel? Live?" For a moment, Sarah allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to kiss him. But then Martha's voice echoed down the hall, calling them for dinner, and the moment broke. James moved away, running his hand through his hair. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have—" "Don't apologize." Sarah touched his arm. "Just let's go slow, okay?" James nodded, and she saw something like relief in his eyes. Dinner was a strange experience. The children ate in silence, occasionally exchanging glances with each other. James was distant, lost in thought, and Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the almost kiss in the library. After dinner, she helped put the children to bed. Lily slept in a room decorated in shades of lavender and pink, full of dolls and books. Noah had the room next door, decorated with adventure themes and dinosaurs. As she was leaving Noah's room after telling him a story, the child held her by the hand. "Sarah," he whispered, "if Mommy comes to talk to you, don't believe everything she says." "Why not, sweetheart?" "Because she gets angry sometimes, and when she gets angry, she tells lies." Before Sarah could ask anything else, Noah turned to the wall and closed his eyes, pretending to sleep. Sarah returned to her room, with her mind in turmoil. The child's words, combined with Martha's warnings and the secrets James seemed to hide, painted an increasingly disturbing picture of life in the Blackwood mansion. It was almost midnight when she decided she needed fresh air. She put on a jacket and went down to the garden, walking along the stone paths among the wildflowers. That's when she saw the light in Elizabeth's room. Sarah stopped, her heart racing. She was sure that room had been empty during the day. James hadn't mentioned that anyone used it. Slowly, she raised her eyes to the window. A female figure stood there, silhouetted against the faint light. Long hair, flowing dress. For a moment, Sarah was certain it was Elizabeth, that somehow the dead woman was watching her from the room. Then the figure moved, and Sarah recognized the movements. It was James. He was in his dead wife's room in the middle of the night doing... What? Sarah quickly returned to the house and climbed the stairs, driven by a curiosity she knew was dangerous. She walked down the hall to the door of Elizabeth's room and heard voices from the other side. James was talking to someone. His voice was low, but Sarah could hear some words. "Can't continue like this. The children, she won't leave like the others." There was a pause, as if he were waiting for an answer. Then he spoke again. "I know you don't approve, but I need to move on. We need to move on." Sarah put her ear to the door, trying to hear more, but suddenly silence fell. The door opened abruptly, and James appeared before her. His face was pale, his eyes wide with surprise. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" "I saw light in the room and thought," she stammered, feeling like an intruder. James pulled her into the room and closed the door behind them. The room was illuminated only by a few candles, creating dancing shadows. "On the walls, who were you talking to?" she asked. James hesitated, running his hand through his hair. "To Elizabeth." "What do you mean?" "I sometimes come here and talk to her. It's stupid, I know, but..." He sat on the bed, suddenly looking exhausted. "It's the only way I've found to deal with the guilt." Sarah approached slowly. "Guilt for what?" James stared at her, and she saw tears in his eyes. "Because I didn't stop her." "Stop her from what?" "From killing herself." The words hung in the air like a terrible confession. Sarah felt the floor move beneath her feet. "Elizabeth committed suicide?" James nodded slowly. "She jumped from the balcony of her room during a storm. I was here in this room when I heard the scream. When I got outside, his voice broke. It was too late." Sarah sat beside him on the bed, instinctively offering comfort through proximity. "Why did you lie? You said it was an accident." "To protect the children. To protect her memory." James stared at her. "Elizabeth was sick, Sarah. Severe depression, paranoia. In the last month she accused me of having an affair, of wanting to get rid of her to be with another woman." "And did you?" "Of course not." The answer came too quickly, too defensively. Sarah studied him in the dark. "James, I need you to... be honest with me. If I'm going to stay here, take care of your children, I need to know the truth." James was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was laden with pain. "I wasn't having an affair, but..." He paused. "There was someone I felt attraction for. Elizabeth noticed before I even admitted it to myself." "Who was it?" "The previous nanny, Jessica." Sarah felt a chill in her stomach. "The one who disappeared?" "She didn't disappear. She left after Elizabeth died. She couldn't stay here anymore after what happened." "What happened exactly?" James stood up and walked to the window. "On the night Elizabeth died, she confronted me, said she knew about my feelings for Jessica, that she would never forgive me. She threatened to take the children away, said I would never see them again. And then? Then she went out to the garden during the storm. I thought she just wanted fresh air, time to calm down. I didn't imagine that." His voice failed. Sarah approached, placing her hand on his shoulder. "It wasn't your fault." James turned to her, and in the dark, with only the candlelight illuminating, his face, he looked much younger and more vulnerable. But it was. If I had been honest about my feelings, if I had asked for a divorce instead of pretending everything was fine, Elizabeth would still be alive. You can't know that. "Yes, I can." James moved closer to her, and Sarah saw the desperation in his eyes. "And that's why you need to leave." "What?" "You need to get out of this house, Sarah, before it happens again." "Before what happens again?" James raised his hands, touching her face with a tenderness that contrasted with the desperation in his voice. "Before I fall in love with you too." The basement of the Blackwood mansion was a place Sarah had avoided since her arrival. Not out of fear, but because there simply was no reason to go down there. Martha took care of the laundry in a room on the ground floor, and the house's heating, worked through a modern system installed in the attic. But now, with Elizabeth's words echoing in her mind, she knew she could no longer delay the investigation. It was 7 in the morning when she decided to explore. James had left early for a hearing in Hertford and wouldn't return until evening. The children were still asleep, and Martha was busy preparing breakfast. It was the perfect moment. Sarah found the basement door behind the kitchen, a heavy dark wood door that creaked when opened. A steep stone staircase descended into darkness, and the air that rose was damp and carried a strange smell: earth, mold, and something else she couldn't identify. She took a flashlight from the kitchen and carefully descended the steps. The basement was larger than she expected, with a low ceiling supported by thick wooden beams. Cobwebs hung from the corners, and the packed dirt floor was covered with a thin layer of dust that showed no one had been there for a long time. At the back of the basement, exactly as Elizabeth had indicated, was an old, rusty boiler. It seemed unused for decades, replaced by the modern system James had mentioned. Sarah approached, illuminating with the flashlight the area behind the equipment. Initially, she saw nothing but shadows and more cobwebs. But when she moved the flashlight to a different angle, she noticed something strange. The floor behind the boiler looked different from the rest of the basement, less compact, as if it had been dug up and then covered again. Sarah looked around and found an old shovel leaning against the wall. She began to dig, first hesitantly, then with more determination. The earth was relatively soft, confirming her suspicions that someone had recently disturbed it. After digging for a few minutes, her shovel hit something solid. Wood. Sarah cleared away the dirt and revealed the lid of a small box, about the size of a shoebox. Her fingers trembled as she removed it from the hole and opened. Inside were photographs, letters, and documents. Sarah picked up the photographs first and examined them in the flashlight's beam. They were old images in black and white, showing the mansion in different eras. But these weren't normal family photos. In many of them, there were young women Sarah didn't recognize, always alongside men of the Blackwood family, probably James's ancestors. One of the photos made her stop breathing. It was more recent in color and showed James alongside a dark-haired woman with dark eyes. They were in the mansion's garden, and the woman wore a uniform that Sarah recognized as being a nanny's. On the back of the photo, a date: 3 years. Ergo, this wasn't Jessica, the nanny James had fallen in love with. It was another woman, someone who had worked in the house even before Elizabeth's death. Sarah picked up the letters. There were several, all written in the same feminine handwriting, but it wasn't Elizabeth's handwriting. These letters were addressed to someone called James. "My dear Jay," one of them said, "I can no longer pretend I feel nothing. I know you're married, I know this is wrong, but I can't stop thinking about you. Your wife doesn't need to know. We can be discreet." Sarah turned the letter over and saw the signature, "With love, Sophia." There were dozens of similar letters, all from Sophia, all declaring love and desire for James. The dates ranged from 2 years before Elizabeth's death until a few weeks before the fatal accident. Sophia. James had lied to her. It hadn't been just Jessica. There had been another woman, someone he had been involved with even during his marriage to Elizabeth. Sarah continued looking through the documents and found something even more disturbing. It was a death certificate. Sophia Rodriguez, 26 years old, killed in a car accident on the road leading to the mansion. The date of death was just 3 days before Elizabeth's death. Sarah's hands trembled as she picked up the last document in the box. It was a medical examiner's report detailing Sophia's autopsy. According to the document, she had died from head trauma, but there were other injuries on the body, wounds that the coroner had classified as consistent with physical assault prior to death. "My God," Sarah murmured, reality beginning to form in her mind. Sophia hadn't died in an accident. She had been murdered, and 3 days later, Elizabeth had killed herself. The sound of footsteps descending the stairs made her jump with fright. Quickly, she put the documents back in the box and hid it behind the boiler, pretending to just be exploring the basement when James appeared on the stairs. "Sarah?" His voice echoed in the confined space. What are you doing down here? James. She turned, trying to appear casual despite her racing heart. I thought you had a hearing today. It had to be postponed. The judge got sick. James descended the rest of the stairs, looking around the basement with a strange expression. You didn't answer my question. I was exploring the house. Martha mentioned there was a wine cellar down here. I thought I'd take a look. James approached her, and Sarah noticed there was something different in his eyes, a coldness that wasn't there the night before. There's no wine cellar here, Sarah. There. Never was. His tone of voice made her swallow hard. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe. James continued approaching. Or maybe you were looking for something else. Sarah tried to keep her voice steady. What else? You tell me. James stopped a few inches from her. Elizabeth said something to you last night, didn't she? About looking for something in the basement. The question caught Sarah off guard. How did James know about her conversation with Elizabeth? I didn't talk to Elizabeth. Don't. Lie to me, Sarah. James's voice was dangerously low. Martha told me you came down in the middle of the night, that she heard music coming from the piano. Sarah felt a chill down her spine. Martha had been spying, reporting her movements to James. All right. Yes, I heard music, and yes, Elizabeth spoke to me. What did she say? Sarah hesitated. If she told James about Elizabeth's message, she would have to explain what she had found in the box, and the documents about Sophia painted a very different picture of the man she was beginning to love. She told me to stop getting involved with you, that I would end up like the others. James studied her face for a long moment. Just that? Just that. James nodded slowly, but Sarah saw that he didn't completely believe her. Let's go upstairs, he said finally. This place isn't safe. The floor is unstable in some parts. They climbed in silence, but Sarah could feel the tension radiating from James. When they reached the kitchen, Martha was there, preparing coffee. Mr. James, Martha said, without looking at Sarah. I need to speak with you in private. James nodded. Sarah, can you check if the children are awake? Tell them breakfast will be ready in a few minutes. Sarah knew she was being dismissed, but she couldn't protest without appearing suspicious. She went upstairs, but instead of going to the children's rooms, she stopped at the top of the stairs to try to hear the conversation in the kitchen. She was digging behind the boiler, she heard Martha say. I saw fresh dirt on her nails and on the shovel. Are you sure? Yes, sir. And she was lying about what she was doing down there. Sarah felt her stomach sink. Martha had not only seen her in the basement, but had discovered that she had been digging in the spot Elizabeth had indicated. Keep her busy today, James said. Don't let her go back to the basement. And if she tries, then you let me know. Immediately. Sarah quickly moved away from the stairs and went to Lily's room. The girl was already awake, sitting on the bed playing with a doll. Good morning, sweetheart, Sarah said, trying to keep her voice normal. Good morning, Sarah. Lily looked at her with her perceptive green eyes. You look worried. I'm fine, just a little tired. Lily tilted her head to the side. Mommy came to visit me last night. Sarah felt a chill. What did she say? She said you found Daddy's secrets, and that now you're afraid of him. The child's words hit Sarah like a punch. Lily, do you know what kind of secrets your mum was talking about? Lily nodded gravely. About the other women Daddy loved, and about what happened to them. What happened to them, sweetheart? Lily hugged the doll tighter. They went away, all of them, and they never came back. Sarah knelt beside the bed. Lily, I need you to tell me everything you know about these women. It's very important. The girl looked at the door as if checking if anyone was listening. Then she whispered, There was Miss Sophia. She was very pretty and played with me. But Mommy didn't like her. They fought a lot. What kind of fights? Mommy said Miss Sophia wanted to steal Daddy, and Miss Sophia said Mommy was crazy and should go to a hospital. Sarah felt the pieces of the puzzle beginning to fit together. And what happened to Miss Sophia? She went away one night. Daddy said she had to travel very far away. But I heard Mommy and Daddy fighting after. Mommy was screaming that it was Daddy's fault. And after that, Lily was quiet for a moment. After that, Mommy got very sad. She didn't eat, didn't play with me and Noah. She just stayed in her room, crying. And then she died. Lily nodded, tears forming in her eyes. But she didn't really die. She's still here, and she's angry. Sarah hugged the girl, feeling the weight of the responsibility she had taken on. These children knew much more than they should, carried much deeper traumas. Lily, listen to me carefully. Don't tell anyone we talked about this, okay? Not. Your dad, not Martha. Why? Because it could be dangerous. Lily studied her with a seriousness that didn't match her 7 years. You're going to leave too, aren't you? No, Sarah said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. I'm not leaving. I'm going to stay here and take care of you. Even if Mommy doesn't want you to? Even if your mom doesn't want me to. Lily smiled for the first time since Sarah had arrived at the mansion. I like you, Sarah. You're brave. Thank you, sweetheart. Now shall we go have breakfast? They went downstairs together, and Sarah found James and Martha in the kitchen, apparently engaged in a normal conversation about the day's chores, but she could feel the tension in the air. Noah was already sitting at the table, silently eating cereal. He waved to Sarah when she entered, but seemed to notice the tense atmosphere because he said nothing. Breakfast passed in uncomfortable silence. James read the newspaper, Martha organized cabinets, and the children ate quickly. Sarah tried to appear normal, but her mind was racing with the information she had discovered. After breakfast, James approached her. I need to go to the office in town. Will you be all right here with the children? Of course. James hesitated, as if he wanted to say something more. Then he leaned in and kissed her forehead. Be careful. The gesture seemed genuine, but Sarah couldn't help wondering if it was a display of affection or a warning. After James left, Sarah spent the morning playing with the children in the garden, but her mind kept returning to the documents hidden in the basement. She needed to go back there and study them better, but how could she do that with Martha watching her? The opportunity came at lunchtime. Martha had to go into town to buy groceries, and the children were taking their afternoon. Napina Sarah waited until she was sure they were asleep, then quietly went down to the basement. This time she brought a better flashlight and managed to photograph all the documents with her cell phone before putting them back in the box. When she came back upstairs, she had a complete file of evidence about Sofia Rodriguez. Back in her room, Sarah studied the photos on her cell phone. Sofia's letters painted the picture of a woman desperately in love with James, willing to break up a marriage to be with him. But the medical documents suggested something much more sinister. According to the report, Sofia had suffered multiple injuries before she died, bruises on her arms, cuts on her hands, signs that she had fought with someone. The car accident had been just the final blow. Sarah picked up the phone and called a contact she had kept from her days in Chicago, an investigative journalist named Michael, who had helped her when she was running from David. Michael? It's Sarah Westmont. Sarah, where are you? I've been trying to find you for months. Why? David Reynolds was arrested last week. Assault charges against another woman. The case is exploding in the media. Sarah felt a mix of relief and vengeance. Good. Where are you? Michael repeated. I need your testimony to strengthen the case against him. I can't come back right now, but Michael, I need a favor. Can you investigate the death of a woman named Sofia Rodriguez? Died 2.5 years ago, officially in a car accident in the Hartford region. Why do you want to know about this? It's complicated. Just help me, please. Michael hesitated. All right, but you owe me an explanation. When this is all over, I'll tell you everything. After hanging up, Sarah felt a little more secure knowing there was someone on the outside investigating, but she still needed to discover the truth about James and his involvement in Sofia's death. At 6 in the evening, James returned from the office. He seemed tense, worried, and Sarah noticed that he watched her differently, as if she were a dangerous stranger instead of the woman he was falling in love with. During dinner, James barely spoke. The children noticed the tension and also stayed quiet. Martha served the food with a grim expression, occasionally exchanging meaningful looks with James. After the children went to bed, James asked to speak with Sarah in the library. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door behind them. "About what?" James poured himself some whiskey and offered Sarah a glass of wine. She accepted, needing the alcohol to calm down. "About what you were really doing in the basement this morning." Sarah took a sip of wine, buying time. "I already told you I was exploring." Martha found the box. The words hit Sarah like lightning. She tried to keep her expression neutral, but she knew James could see through her. "What box?" James walked to the desk and picked up the box Sarah had hidden behind the boiler. He placed it on the table between them. This box, with Sophia's letters and the documents about her death. Sarah could no longer deny it. "All right, I found the box, and I read the contents." "And what did you think?" "That you lied to me. You said Elizabeth was paranoid when she accused you of having an affair. But you did have one, didn't you, with Sophia?" James drank the whiskey in one go. "Yes, I did." The confession, even expected, still hit her hard. "And she died 3 days before Elizabeth killed herself?" "Yes." "And you think that's a coincidence?" James stared at her for a long moment. "What are you insinuating, Sarah?" "I'm asking if you killed Sofia Rodriguez." The silence that followed was deafening. James placed the empty glass on the table with excessive care. "Do you really believe I'm capable of murder?" "I don't know what to believe. The medical documents show she was assaulted before she died. The letters show she was pressuring you to leave Elizabeth, and 3 days after her death your wife kills herself." Sarah stood up, starting to pace the room. "It's a very convenient sequence of events." James also stood up, but didn't approach her. "Do you want to know what really happened?" "I do." James sighed deeply. "Sophia was unstable, obsessed. What started as a casual affair turned into something dangerous. She threatened to tell Elizabeth everything if I didn't ask for a divorce immediately. And you didn't want a divorce." "Not at that moment. Elizabeth was going through a difficult period, and I didn't want to traumatize the children even more. So, you tried to end things with Sophia." "I tried, but she wouldn't accept it. She started showing up at the house at all hours, calling constantly, following Elizabeth when she went out with the children." James ran his hands through his hair. "Elizabeth realized something was happening. She started to suspect, to ask questions. And then? Then Sophia decided to force the situation. She arranged to meet me on the road, said she had something important to tell me. When I got there, she said she had told Elizabeth everything, and that now I had no choice but to get a divorce." Sarah felt a chill in her stomach. "And you got angry?" "I was furious, not just because she had broken our promise of discretion, but because she had used my children as weapons. Elizabeth was devastated. The children were confused and frightened. And then you hurt her." James stared at her directly. "Yes, I hurt her. We fought physically. She scratched me, I pushed her. She hit her head on the car and died." "Not immediately. She was injured, bleeding, but conscious. I panicked. Instead of calling an ambulance, I put her in her car and staged an accident." The confession was finally complete. James had killed Sophia, even if not intentionally. And Elizabeth found out the truth. "Elizabeth knew I had gone out that night. When she heard about Sophia's death, she put 2 and 2 together. But she had no proof, so she couldn't report me without seeming crazy. That's why she killed herself. She couldn't live with me anymore knowing what I had done. But she also couldn't live without the children." James sat heavily in an armchair, so she chose the only way out she saw. Sarah processed everything she had heard. James was a killer, even if not premeditated. He had killed a woman and covered up the crime, and then he had watched his wife self-destruct with guilt and knowledge. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you already know too much, and because—" James looked at her with eyes full of pain. "Because I'm falling in love with you, and you deserve to know who I really am. And who are you really?" A man who made a terrible mistake and lost everything because of it. A man who doesn't deserve a second chance, but who is begging for one anyway. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. She had fled from a violent man only to fall in love with another. The irony was cruel. James, I can't be with someone who killed a person. I understand. James stood up. I'll make arrangements for you to leave tomorrow. I'll give a good recommendation. Enough money to start a new life somewhere. Else, and the children, they'll adjust. They always do. The resignation in his voice broke Sarah's heart. She could see that he truly loved his children, that the guilt of what he had done was eating him up inside. James. Before she could finish the sentence, all the lights in the library went out. An icy breeze swept through the room, and the smell of wilting flowers filled the air. She's here, James whispered. A female voice, clear and cold, echoed through the room. Now she knows the truth, James. Now she knows what kind of man you are. Sarah felt a presence approach her, and suddenly it was as if cold hands touched her shoulders. But you don't know the whole truth, do you, Sarah? Elizabeth's voice continued. You don't know about the others. What others? Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Sophia wasn't the first, and Jessica wasn't the last. James has a pattern, darling. He attracts vulnerable women, makes them fall in love with him, and when they become inconvenienced... Stop, James shouted. That's not true, isn't it? The temperature in the room seemed to drop even further. And the nanny before Sophia, Amanda Wilson, she also mysteriously disappeared? Sarah felt the world spin around her. How many women had worked in that house? How many had disappeared? And you, Sarah Westmont, Elizabeth continued, do you really think it was a coincidence that James chose exactly you? A woman running from an abusive relationship with no close family, no one who would look for you if you disappeared. The lights suddenly came back on and Elizabeth had vanished, but her words hung in the air like poison. Sarah looked at James, who was as pale as a ghost. Is it true, she asked, about Amanda Wilson? James closed his eyes. Amanda. Was an accident. She found out about Sophia, threatened to blackmail me. And you killed her too. I didn't want to. She attacked me with a knife. I defended myself. It was self-defense. Where is her body? James was silent. James, where is Amanda Wilson's body? In the garden, buried under the white rosebush. Sarah felt nauseous. Not one, but two dead. Women. And Elizabeth was right. She had been chosen precisely because she was vulnerable, because no one would look for her. I need to leave, she said, heading for the door. Sarah, wait. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain, James. You're a serial killer, and I'm your next potential victim. She ran out of the library, up the stairs, and locked herself in her room. With trembling hands, she picked up the phone and called Michael. Michael? It's me again. I need you to call the police. I have information about 2 murders. But when she tried to speak, she realized there was no signal. The phone was dead. Sarah ran to the window and looked outside. James's car was blocking the entrance to the property. She was trapped. A soft knock on the door made her jump with fright. Sarah. It was Lily's voice. Can I come in? Sarah opened the Daystrom found both children standing in the hallway, still in their pajamas. What are you doing awake? We heard you shouting, Noah said, and Mommy came to warn us. Warn you about what? Lily held Sarah's hand. That you need to leave. This house tonight before it's too late. How did you... Mommy told us everything, Lily interrupted. About the other women, about what Daddy did to them. Sarah knelt down to the children's level. You knew? All this time you knew that your father... We know Daddy is a bad man, Noah said, tears streaming down his small face. But he's our daddy, we can't tell anyone. But Mommy can, Lily added, and she'll protect you like she tried to protect the others. How is she going to protect me? The 2 children exchanged a meaningful look. Come with us, Lily said. We'll show you. Sarah followed Lily and Noah down the dark hallway, their bare feet making the least possible noise on the wooden floor. The children walked with a determination that contrasted with their age, as if they were fulfilling a long-planned mission. "Where are we going?" Sarah whispered. "To Mommy's room," Lily answered without looking back. "She has something to show you." When they reached the door to Elizabeth's room, Lily opened it without hesitation. The room was illuminated by a soft golden light that seemed to have no specific source. Elizabeth was there, standing in front of the vanity, more solid and real than Sarah had ever seen her. The dead woman turned slowly to face them. Her wavy blonde hair floated as if submerged in water, and her green eyes shone with a supernatural intensity. She wore the same white dress that appeared in the more recent photographs, but now it was stained with earth and moisture. "Sarah," Elizabeth said, her voice echoing strangely in the room. "Finally, you've come." Sarah felt her legs weaken. Seeing Elizabeth this way, so real and present, confirmed everything that had happened in the past weeks. The ghosts were real. The house was indeed haunted. "Elizabeth," she managed to say, "why are you helping me?" Elizabeth smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. There was something wild and dangerous in it. "Because you're like me, a woman who was deceived by James, who believed his lies, who almost became his next victim." Elizabeth came closer, and Sarah could feel the cold emanating from her presence. "But unlike me, you still have a chance to escape." "How?" Elizabeth walked to a wall and placed her hand on it. Immediately, part of the wall moved, revealing a secret passage. "This house has many secrets," Elizabeth explained. "Passages that my mother-in-law showed me when I married James. She also knew what kind of man he was. She also tried to warn me." Sarah approached the passage. It was narrow but large enough for a person to pass through. "Where does it lead?" "Out of the property. There's an exit in the forest, about a mile from the house. From there you can reach the main road. And the children." Elizabeth looked at Lily and Noah, who remained silent near the door. "They stay. They're his children, and as much as I love them, I can't take them from James without legal consequences that you can't face. But they know the truth. They could be in danger. James would never hurt his own children. He may be a monster with women, but he genuinely loves Lily and Noah." Elizabeth paused. "And I'll be here to protect them." Sarah looked at the children, feeling her heart break. She had grown attached to them, wanted to protect them, but Elizabeth was right. Taking 2 children on a run would be impossible. "I can't just abandon them." "You're not abandoning us," Lily said, approaching. "You're saving yourself, and when you're safe, you can call the police to help us." The maturity in the 7-year-old girl's voice was disturbing. How many things had these children witnessed? How many secrets did they carry? "Lily is right," Elizabeth said. "Go now, before James realizes you've discovered the complete truth." "He already knows. We talked in the library. He confessed everything." Elizabeth frowned. "He confessed about Sophia and Amanda?" "Yes. And about Victoria." Sarah felt her blood freeze. "Who is Victoria?" Elizabeth and the children exchanged somber looks. "Victoria was the first," Noah said in his small voice. "Before Miss Sophia, before Miss Amanda. She took care of us when Mummy got sick the first time." "When Elizabeth got sick the first time?" "After Lily was born," Elizabeth explained. "I had severe postpartum depression. James hired Victoria to help me with the children." Her expression hardened. "He seduced her while I was vulnerable, recovering from childbirth." "What happened to her?" "James said she had returned to her hometown, but I found her body 2 years later when I was redesigning the garden." Elizabeth pointed out the window. "Buried under the jasmine vine, near the fountain." Sarah felt nauseous. 3 women. James had killed 3 women. "Why didn't you report it?" "To whom?" "James is a respected attorney, from a powerful family. I was a woman with a history of depression, talking about bodies buried in the garden." Elizabeth laughed bitterly. "Who would believe me?" A noise coming from downstairs made them all fall silent, heavy footsteps climbing the stairs. "He's coming," Lily whispered. "Go," Elizabeth said urgently to Sarah. "Now." Sarah looked last time at the children, then entered the secret passage. Elizabeth closed the wall behind her, and Sarah found herself in complete darkness. The passage was narrow and damp, with the smell of earth and mold. Sarah felt along the walls, finding a small flashlight hanging on a hook. When she turned it on, she saw she was in a tunnel dug into the rock, probably built decades ago. She began to walk, trying to move quickly but without making noise. The tunnel extended for hundreds of yards, going up and down according to the terrain of the mountain. As she walked, she heard muffled sounds coming from above, voices, doors slamming, footsteps running. James had discovered her escape. After what seemed like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, Sarah saw a faint light ahead. The exit. She turned off the flashlight and approached carefully. The exit was hidden behind a dense bush, well, camouflaged in the forest. Sarah came out and looked around, trying to orient herself. She could see the lights of the mansion in the distance, through the trees. She began walking in the opposite direction, toward what she hoped was the main road. The forest was dense and dark, and she constantly tripped over roots and stones. That's when she heard the barking. James had released the dogs. Sarah didn't know there were dogs on the property. She had never seen or heard them. But now she could hear at least 2 or 3 large animals running through the forest, sniffing out her trail. Pure panic took hold of her. Sarah began to run, no longer caring about the noise she made. Branches scratched her face and arms. Stones cut her bare feet, but she kept running. The barking was getting closer. Suddenly, she heard a voice shouting her name. James was in the forest too, hunting her. Sarah! His voice echoed among the trees. Come back to the house. You don't understand. I can explain everything. Sarah didn't answer, continuing to run. She could see a light ahead, perhaps the main road. Sarah, you can't run away. I won't let you abandon me like Elizabeth did. The desperation in his voice made her speed up even more. James was losing control, and men out of control were the most dangerous. She finally reached the main road, but it was deserted. No cars, no houses nearby. Just empty asphalt stretching in both directions in the darkness. Sarah chose a direction randomly and began running down the road. At least here she could move more quickly without obstacles. But the dogs were getting closer. She could hear their heavy breathing, their paws hitting the asphalt behind her. That's when she saw the headlights. A car was coming toward her. Sarah waved desperately, screaming for help. The car slowed down and stopped. "Please," she shouted, running to the driver's window. "Help me." The window lowered, revealing a middle-aged man with a concerned expression. "Ma'am, what happened? Are you hurt? Please take me away from here. There's a man chasing me. He wants to kill me." The man looked beyond her and saw James's flashlights approaching from the forest. "Get in the car," he said, unlocking the doors. Sarah quickly got into the passenger seat. Thank you so much. I'll take you to the nearest police station." As the car drove away, Sarah looked back and saw James emerge from the forest, accompanied by 2 large German shepherds. He stood in the road watching the car drive away, his features illuminated by the taillights. "Who was that man?" the driver asked. "My former employer. He killed people, women who worked for him." The driver picked up his cell phone. "I'm going to call the police right now." But when he tried to make the call, there was no signal. Strange, there's usually a signal on this road. Sarah looked at his phone, then at her own. There was no signal on hers either. A terrible doubt began to form in her mind. "Sir, how long have you been driving on this road?" "Tonight? About an hour. Why?" "Did you see other cars, other people?" The man frowned. "No. Now that you mention it, the road is strangely empty for a Saturday night." Sarah looked out the window. The landscape seemed to repeat itself. The same trees, the same curves as if they were driving in circles. "Stop the car," she said. "What?" "Stop the car." The man braked abruptly. Sarah got out and looked around. They were exactly at the same place where she had stopped the car the first time. She could see the entrance to the Blackwood property just a few yards away. "This is impossible," the driver said, also getting out of the car. "We drove for almost 40 minutes in a straight line." Sarah felt a familiar chill in the air. "The smell of wilting flowers, Miss Elizabeth," she murmured. Elizabeth's figure materialized beside the road, more solid and real than ever. "You can't leave this property, Sarah," Elizabeth said, her voice echoing strangely. Not until James pays for what he did. Elizabeth, I need to leave. I need to call the police. The police won't believe you, just as they didn't believe me, Elizabeth approached. James is too powerful, has too many contacts. He'll find a way to get rid of the charges. The driver looked between Sarah and the spot where she was talking, clearly not seeing Elizabeth. Ma'am, who are you talking to? There's only one way. To ensure James never hurts anyone again, Elizabeth continued, ignoring the man. He needs to confess publicly, and he needs to pay for what he did to the other women. How? Elizabeth smiled, and this time her smile was genuinely terrible. By going back to the house, confronting him, making him admit everything in front of witnesses. That's insane. He'll kill me. Not if I'm there to protect you. Sarah looked at the driver, who seemed increasingly concerned about her behavior. Ma'am, I think you should go to a hospital. You seem to be in shock. Elizabeth walked to the man and passed her hand across his forehead. Immediately his eyes became glazed, and he returned to the car like a zombie. He'll go back home and won't remember anything, Elizabeth explained. This night will only exist for us. Elizabeth, I can't go back there. James is too dangerous. He's dangerous to defenseless women. But you won't be defenseless. You'll have all the fury of a dead woman by your side. Sarah looked at the Blackwood property in the distance. She knew Elizabeth was right about one thing. James was too powerful to be brought down by simple accusations. He would find a way to escape the consequences, just as he had done before. What do you want me to do? Go back to the house, confront him, force him to confess everything on tape, and then... Elizabeth paused. Let me deal with him. Are you going to kill him? I'm going to give him the same chance he gave Sophia, Amanda, and Victoria. Sarah thought of the 3 dead women, the traumatized children, all the future victims James could make if he wasn't stopped. All right, she said finally. But first, I want to see the bodies. I want concrete evidence of what he did. Elizabeth nodded. Come with me. They walked back to the property, passing through the main entrance. James wasn't in sight, probably still looking for Sarah on the other side of the forest. Elizabeth guided Sarah to the back garden, to an area she had never fully explored. There, among the rose bushes and jasmines, Elizabeth pointed to 3 specific locations. Victoria is under the jasmine, Sophia is under the white roses, Amanda is under the azaleas. Sarah looked at the flowers, imagining the bodies buried underneath. 3 young women with dreams and ambitions, reduced to fertilizer for a macabre garden. How did you know where they were? After I died, I could see everything. The past, the present. I saw James burying them one by one. I saw him planting flowers over them, as if they were monuments to his cruelty. And you couldn't do anything. At first, no, it took time for me to learn to interact with the physical world. But now, Elizabeth raised her hand, and all the flowers in the garden began to wilt simultaneously. Now I can do much more. They heard the sound of a car arriving. James had returned from the hunt in the forest. Hide, Elizabeth said. Let him enter the house. Then we confront him. Sarah hid behind a large tree and watched James park near the main entrance. He got out of the car with a furious expression, accompanied by the 2 German shepherds. Martha, he shouted, entering the house. Martha! Sarah heard muffled voices. Coming from inside the house, James was interrogating Martha about Sarah's escape. Now, Elizabeth said. They entered through the back door and quietly climbed to the 2nd floor. James was in the library talking on the phone. Yes, she ran away. No, I couldn't find her. You need to send someone to look on the main road. Sarah approached the door and heard James giving instructions to someone to locate and deal with her. He was calling contacts in the police, corrupting authorities to cover up his crimes. See, Elizabeth whispered, he will never pay for his crimes through common justice. Sarah took out her cell phone and started recording. Even without a signal, the local recording would still work. She pushed open the library door and entered. James turned, surprised. Sarah, how did you... I came back for a final conversation, she said, keeping the cell phone hidden behind her back. I want to hear the whole truth, about all of them. James slowly hung up the phone. You should have kept running. Probably. But now I want answers. About Victoria, about Sophia, about Amanda, about all the women you killed. James approached, her slowly like a predator circling his prey. You want to know about them? Very well, Victoria was a naive idealist who believed she could save me. Sophia was an opportunist who wanted to destroy my family. Amanda was a greedy blackmailer who tried to extort me. And they all deserved to die? They all put themselves in my way. They all threatened everything I had built. James stopped a few inches from her, just as you're doing now. And Elizabeth? Did she also get in your way? Elizabeth? James paused, and for a moment Sarah saw genuine pain in his eyes. Elizabeth was the only one I truly loved, and the only one who completely destroyed me. Is that why you let her kill herself? I didn't let her kill herself, I pushed her. The confession came out as a whisper, but Sarah caught it. James had killed Elizabeth too. It hadn't been suicide. You murdered her. She was going to tell everything to the police, about Victoria, about Sophia. She had evidence, photos, documents. She was going to destroy everything. James ran his hands through his hair. We fought on the balcony of her room. She scratched me. I pushed her. She fell. And then you made. It looked like suicide. It was easier that way. A depressed woman who killed herself during a storm, no one questioned it. Sarah made sure she was recording everything clearly. James had confessed to 4 murders. And now you're going to kill. Me too. James stared at her with an expression that mixed desire and hatred. I don't want to kill you, Sarah. I really fell in love with you, more than I fell in love with any of the others. But you'll kill me anyway. If I have no choice. James moved even closer, and Sarah could feel the danger emanating from him like heat. You have a choice, a voice said behind him. James turned quickly. Elizabeth was standing in the doorway of the library, more solid and threatening than Sarah had ever seen her. Elizabeth, James whispered, his face losing all color. Hello, darling, Elizabeth said calmly. I've missed you. James backed away, stumbling over a chair. You're not real, you're dead. I'm dead, yes, thanks to you, but that doesn't mean I'm not real. Elizabeth began walking toward James, and as she moved, the temperature in the room dropped. Drastically, the air became dense, charged with a supernatural energy that made Sarah's hair stand on end. Elizabeth, I'm sorry. I didn't want what, to kill me or to be discovered? Elizabeth laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. You don't feel anything, James. You never did. James looked at Sarah, as if seeking an alliance. Sarah, you need to get out of here now. But Sarah didn't move. She wanted to see how this would end. Elizabeth raised her hand, and all the objects in the library began to move. Books flew from the shelves, paintings fell from the walls, the heavy wooden desk dragged across the floor. Stop! James shouted. The children, you'll frighten the children. The children have been frightened for 2 years, Elizabeth replied, frightened by the monster they have for a father. James tried to run to the door, but it closed with a bang. All the windows also closed, and the room was sealed. Elizabeth, please. I know I did terrible things, but I can change. I can be a better man. Like you gave Victoria the chance to be. Like Sophia begged to be. Like Amanda tried to negotiate. Elizabeth moved closer until she was face to face with James. You had every chance in the world, darling, and you wasted all of them. James fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Please, for the children. They need their father. They need to be safe. And as long as you're alive, no woman will be safe. Elizabeth placed her hands around James's neck, and Sarah saw her fingers pass through his skin as if they were made of ice. James began to convulse, his eyes rolling back. It was as if Elizabeth were freezing him from the inside out. Elizabeth, stop, Sarah said. Don't be like him. Elizabeth turned to her, and Sarah saw that her eyes were completely black. He doesn't deserve mercy. Maybe not, but you deserve peace, and vengeance won't bring that. Elizabeth hesitated, her grip loosening slightly on James's neck. "Let him live," Sarah continued, "but make sure he pays for his crimes. Use your power to expose the truth, not to become a killer, too." Elizabeth looked at James, who was unconscious but still breathing. "You're right," she said finally. "Death would be too easy for him." Elizabeth raised her hands, and all the documents and evidence that James had hidden over the years began to materialize in the air. Photographs, letters, falsified medical reports, records of payments to corrupt authorities. "When the police arrive," Elizabeth said, "they'll find all this. Enough evidence to convict James for all the crimes he committed." "And how do we know?" "The police will come," Elizabeth smiled, "because you're going to call them, and this time they'll believe you." Sarah's cell phone began to ring. Michael was calling. "Hello? Sarah, I finally got through to you. Where are you? I have information about Sofia Rodriguez." "Michael, call the police, now. I have evidence of multiple murders, and I have the murderer here with me." "What? Sarah, where are you?" Sarah gave the address of the mansion and hung up. She looked at Elizabeth, who was beginning to become translucent again. "You're leaving?" "My work here is finished. James will pay for his crimes, the other women will have justice, and my children will be safe. And you, will you find peace?" Elizabeth smiled, and for the first time it was a genuinely serene smile. "Finally, yes. Thank you, Sarah, for having the courage to do what I couldn't do in life." Elizabeth disappeared, leaving only the faint smell of jasmine in the air. James began to regain consciousness, groaning and touching his neck. When he saw Sarah, he tried to stand up. "Don't move," she said, showing him the cell phone. "I recorded everything. Your confession. Everything." James looked around the library, seeing all the evidence scattered about. "How?" "Elizabeth, she made sure you would pay for everything you did." Sirens began to sound in the distance, rapidly approaching. "The children," James said weakly. "What will happen to the children?" "They'll be fine. They'll finally be safe." James closed his eyes, defeated. "I really loved you, Sarah." "No, James, you never knew what love is, but maybe in prison you'll learn." The sirens were getting closer, and Sarah could see the red and blue lights reflecting in the windows. It was the end of James Blackwood's reign of terror, and the beginning of a new life for all who had survived his deadly games. 6 months. Later, Sarah stood before the mirror in her new apartment in Hartford, adjusting the navy blue blazer she would wear to court. Today would be the last day of James Blackwood's trial, and she would be called to testify as the key witness. The months following that terrible night at the mansion had been a whirlwind of police interrogations, sessions with psychologists, and the slow process of rebuilding her life. The recording she had made of James's confession, combined with the supernaturally gathered evidence by Elizabeth, had been enough to convict the man she had once thought she loved. The excavation in the mansion's garden had revealed exactly what Elizabeth had said: 3 bodies buried beneath the flowers. Victoria Carter, 23 years old. Sofia Rodriguez, 26 years old. Amanda Wilson, 28 years old. All young women, all nannies or caregivers who had worked for the Blackwood family. All victims of James's sick obsession with control and domination. Sarah picked up her car keys and headed to the courthouse. During the drive, she thought about how her life had completely changed. After James's arrest, she had received an unexpected proposal. Michael, the investigative journalist who had helped her, offered her a job at his communications company. "You have an instinct for investigation," he had said, "and the courage to face the truth, even when it's dangerous." In the past months, working alongside Michael, Sarah had discovered a passion she didn't know she possessed: unraveling mysteries, exposing injustices, giving voice to victims of crimes that the system tried to silence. It was as if all the pain and trauma she had suffered with David, and then with James, had transformed into a driving force to help others. And Michael. Michael was different from all the men she had known. Gentle without being condescending, strong without being controlling. intelligent without using it to manipulate. They had started as colleagues, then became friends, and in the past few weeks something deeper had begun to blossom between them. But Sarah was still afraid to give herself completely. The scars left by David and James didn't disappear easily. When she arrived at the courthouse, she found Michael waiting for her at the entrance. He wore a grey suit that accentuated his brown eyes and dark hair, and smiled when he saw her. "Ready for this?" he asked, offering his arm. "Ready to end this," she replied, accepting the support. They entered the courthouse together. James's trial had attracted a lot of media attention. A respected attorney from a traditional family revealed as a serial killer was headline news in every newspaper in the state. Sarah took her place in the witness room and looked at James for the first time in 6 months. He was unrecognizable. The elegant, controlled man she had known had been replaced by someone thin, pale, with deep, dark circles. Prison had broken his facade of sophistication. When their gazes met, James tried to smile, but it was a pathetic, desperate gesture. Sarah felt pity for him, but not regret. He had made his choices. The district attorney called her to testify, and Sarah told her story with clarity and firmness. She spoke about her arrival at the mansion, the strange events, her gradual discovery of the truth about James. When they played the recording of his confession, an absolute silence fell over the courtroom. James's voice, clear and unmistakable, admitting to having killed Victoria, Sophia, Amanda, and Elizabeth, echoed through the room. Some jurors closed their eyes, others shook their heads in disbelief. During cross-examination, the defense attorney tried to discredit her testimony, suggesting that she was mentally unstable, that she had been manipulated by the alleged supernatural manifestations in the mansion. "Miss Westmont," the attorney said, "do you really expect this court to believe that you conversed with the ghost of the defendant's wife?" Sarah looked at him calmly. "I expect this court to focus on the physical evidence, the bodies found in the garden, the recorded confession, the documents that prove the crimes. What I did or didn't see in the mansion is irrelevant compared to that concrete evidence." The attorney tried to insist, but the judge cut him off. The evidence was overwhelming and everyone knew it. After her testimony, Sarah left the courthouse with Michael. They went to lunch at a quiet restaurant near downtown. "How are you feeling?" Michael asked, studying her face. "Relieved. I can finally close this chapter of my life and open a new one." There was something in the way he said this that made Sarah look at him more carefully. "Michael, Sarah, I know it's complicated. I know you've been through terrible traumas that you need time to heal completely." He took her hand across the table. "But I want you to know that I'm here, not as someone who wants to save you or fix you, but as someone who admires you exactly as you are." Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. "I'm afraid, Michael, afraid to trust again, to give myself and find out I've made another mistake. And what if it's not a mistake? What if it's exactly what you deserve?" Before Sarah could answer, Michael's phone rang. It was the courthouse. The jury had reached a verdict. They quickly returned to the courthouse, where a crowd had gathered to hear the decision. James was standing next to his attorneys, trembling slightly. In the cases of first-degree murder against Victoria Carter, Sophia Rodriguez, Amanda Wilson, and Elizabeth Blackwood, the judge read, the jury finds the defendant guilty on all charges. A murmur ran through the room. James collapsed in his chair as if he had been punched. "James Blackwood," the judge continued, "you are sentenced to 4 life sentences, with no possibility of parole." Sarah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. It was over. James would never harm anyone again. As they left the courthouse, a man approached her. He was tall, in his 40s, with graying hair and kind eyes. "Ms. Westmont, I'm Dr. Edward Sanders, the social worker responsible for the Blackwood children." Sarah felt her heart race. "How are Lily and Noah?" "That's what I wanted to talk to you about. The children have been asking about you constantly. They want to see you. But shouldn't they stay away from all this? To recover?" "Actually, our psychologist believes that a controlled reunion would be beneficial for them. You represented safety and care during a very traumatic time. Seeing that you're well, could help them process the events better. Sarah looked at Michael, who nodded encouragingly. Where are they now? With their Aunt Elizabeth, their mother's sister. She's a good woman, but the children are still adjusting. Would it be possible to visit them tomorrow? Of course. The next day, Sarah drove to a cozy house in the suburbs of Hartford. Aunt Elizabeth, who ironically had the same name as the children's mother, was a middle-aged woman, warm and attentive. "They've talked so much about you," said Elizabeth, the aunt, receiving Sarah at the door. "You were very important to them during those terrible days." Lily and Noah were in the backyard, playing with a golden retriever. When they saw Sarah, they ran to her. "Sarah!" Lily shouted, hugging her tightly. "You're okay. We were worried." "I'm fine, sweetheart. How are you?" "Better," Noah said, holding her hand. "Aunt Elizabeth is really nice, and we have a dog now. His name is Buddy." They spent the afternoon talking. The children seemed lighter, freer than when Sarah had known them in the mansion. The weight of secrets had been lifted from their small shoulders. "Sarah," Lily said when they were saying goodbye, "Mommy came to visit us one last time, the night after Daddy was arrested." "What did she say?" "That now she could rest, that you two were very brave, and that she was proud of us for telling the truth." Sarah felt tears in her eyes. "Your mommy will always be proud of you. You are incredible children." When Sarah left Aunt Elizabeth's house, she felt as if a final weight had been lifted from her shoulders. The children were safe, Elizabeth had found peace, and James would pay for his crimes. Michael was waiting for her in the car. "How was it?" "Perfect, they're really doing well." Sarah settled into the passenger seat. "Michael, can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why are you interested in me? I mean, really, you could have any woman." Michael smiled. "You want to know the truth?" "Always. Since the first day you worked with me, I saw something special in you, a strength you don't even recognize in yourself. You survived David, faced James, saved those children. You're the bravest woman I've ever met." "I don't feel brave. Most of the time, I feel scared." "Courage isn't the absence of fear, Sarah. It's doing the right thing despite the fear." They drove in silence for a few minutes. Then Michael stopped the car at a lookout that gave a view of the entire city. "There's something I want to show." "You," he said, taking a folder from the back seat. Inside the folder were documents, photographs, and newspaper articles. "What is this?" "The story of David Reynolds. After you fled Chicago, I continued investigating him. What I discovered was worse than we thought." Sarah leafed through the documents. David hadn't just assaulted her and other women. He was involved in a corruption network that included influence, peddling, and money laundering. "He was sentenced to 15 years in prison last week," Michael said. "Your initial investigation, your evidence, was fundamental in building the case against him." "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I want you to understand something. You're not a victim, Sarah. You're a survivor who became a fighter. You didn't just escape the men who tried to destroy you. You defeated them." Sarah looked at the city stretching out before them, the lights beginning to come on with the twilight. "And now?" "Now you decide what story you want to write for the rest of your life." Michael moved closer to her, his hand gently touching her face. "Sarah, I love you. Not the obsessive, possessive love that David or James felt. I love you for the strong, intelligent, and brave woman you are. I love you for the way you refuse to let yourself break, even when everything seems impossible." Sarah felt her heart accelerate. "Michael, you don't have to answer me now. I just want you to know that when you're ready to trust again, to love again, I'll be here." Sarah kissed him. It was a soft kiss full of promises and possibilities. There was no urgency or desperation, just the gentle certainty that sometimes, after all the darkness, light finally arrives. When they separated, she smiled, the first truly happy smile she had given in years. "I love you too, Michael, and I'm ready." 3 years later, Sarah stood in the garden of her new house, watching Michael play with Buddy, the golden retriever they had adopted together. They had married 6 months before, in a simple ceremony, surrounded by friends and family. Lily and Noah, now 10 and 8 respectively, visited them regularly. They had become part of the extended family Sarah never knew she wanted. The investigative journalism company that she and Michael had expanded together was thriving. They specialized in cases of domestic violence and crimes against women, using their own experiences to help other victims find justice. "Penny, for your thoughts," Michael said, approaching and wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Just thinking about how life can change," Sarah said, leaning against him. 3 years ago I was running away, haunted by the past. Now you're home." "I'm home," she agreed. That night, after they went to bed, Sarah had a dream. She was back at the Blackwood mansion, but this time there were no shadows or mystery. The house was filled with golden light, and Elizabeth was there, not the tormented, vengeful Elizabeth she had known, but a peaceful and serene version. "Thank you," Elizabeth said simply. "For what?" "For saving my children, for preventing James from making more victims, for showing me that it's possible to find true love after so much pain." "Did you find peace?" Elizabeth smiled. "I did. And you?" Sarah looked around the dream, where she could see her current life projected on the walls of the mansion. Michael, the children, her work, her new home. "Yes," she said. "I found it. Then my work is finished." Elizabeth began to fade, but before she disappeared completely, she whispered, "Some love stories need to go through hell to reach paradise. Yours has arrived." Sarah woke up with tears in her eyes, but they were tears of gratitude. She looked at Michael sleeping beside her, his face peaceful in the morning light, and knew that Elizabeth was right. She had gone through hell with David, with James, with all the demons of her past, but she had emerged stronger, wiser, and finally able to recognize and accept true love when it appeared. 6 months later, Sarah discovered she was pregnant. When she told Michael, he picked her up and spun her around the room, laughing with pure joy. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked, caressing her still flat stomach. "I'm ready for anything as long as it's with you." And she was. For the first time in her life, Sarah Westmont was completely, truly ready for the future. Not because all her problems had disappeared or because her life was perfect, but because she had learned the difference between true love and obsession, between protection and possessiveness, between being saved and saving herself. 2 years. Later, when her daughter Sophie was born, Sarah held her in her arms and whispered, "You were born of true love, little one. Not of fear, not of need, but of genuine love between two people who chose to heal together." And when she looked out the hospital window and saw Michael chatting animatedly with Lily and Noah, who had come to meet their new adoptive little sister, Sarah knew she had finally found her true home. It wasn't a physical place. It was a family built on solid foundations of trust, respect, and unconditional love. It was the peace that comes from knowing you are loved exactly as you are, scars and all. And sometimes, on quiet nights when she cradled Sophie to sleep, Sarah could swear she felt a gentle presence in the room, not haunted or vengeful, but protective and loving. Elizabeth had found her redemption in ensuring that other women found the happiness she was denied. The Blackwood mansion was demolished a year after the trial. In its place, a support center for women victims of domestic violence was built, funded by a foundation that Sarah and Michael created. James died in prison 2 years later, not by violence but from heart disease. When Sarah heard the news, she felt only a distant sadness for the wasted life and for the women who could have been saved if he had chosen a different path. But she didn't spend time mourning the dead. There was too much life to be lived, too much love to be given and received. And when Sophie took her first steps in the home garden, running straight into Michael's arms while Lily and Noah applauded and Buddy barked with joy, Sarah knew that all the dark nights, all the fears and pains had been worth it, because they had led her there, to that perfect moment of pure love and complete happiness, home. And finally, after so many years running from the past, Sarah Westmont was at peace with the present and excited about the future. The truest love story of her life had begun the moment she decided to love herself enough to demand more respect, more kindness, more honesty. And when she found someone capable of giving all that, she was ready to receive. True love, she learned, doesn't come with drama and obsession. It comes quietly, solid and constant, building foundations that can withstand any storm. And sometimes, if you're very, very lucky, it comes exactly when you need it most. As it came for Sarah, as it came to stay.